Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is Angular Lunch, hosted by Oasis Digital, and today we're going to hear from Rachel Noccioli. She's going to tell us a little bit about Angular Material. Before we get started though, a quick announcement. I just want to let everyone know that we're actually starting a second meetup, or rather taking over the management of a second meetup. In the evenings, there's the Angular STL Meetup. You can find that on Meetup under Angular STL. And so we're going to be doing that one once a month in the evenings as well. So go ahead and check that out. Again, thanks to Oasis Digital for the space and the pizza. And so here's Rachel.
Hi, I'm Rachel Noccioli. I'm a software developer at Oasis Digital and an Angular Bootcamp instructor. So what is Angular Material? Angular Material is a component set that is an implementation of Google's material design system, and it can help transform boring business apps into something worth looking at. But let's take a step back and talk about design. So before you start thinking about laying out what your pages are going to look like for an app, it can be really helpful to decide what the individual components are going to look like throughout your app so that you can have a consistent app and you don't end up with 20 buttons across your app with different colors and sizes and maybe borders. So this is called having a design system, where you have these individual components that you can piece together into a larger app and be able to like reuse things and not have to decide with every new component what it's going to look like. So if having a design system is great, but if your team doesn't have the resources to create one on your own, then there are several different open source design systems that large companies have put out there for teams to adopt. So VMware's Clarity, Salesforce Lightning, IBM Carbon, those are a few different options. And then in this talk, we're going to focus on Google's Material Design. So like I said, Angular Material is a component set, and it implements Google's Material Design. So it also has a collection of other tools for building non-material components, and has some features that help with accessibility, drag and drop, responsive layout. But we're not going to focus on those parts today. We're going to focus on the aspects that relate to material design. So some of the benefits of using Angular Material. So one of the key ones is visual polish. So material design started as the design system for Google's internal, like the products that they create for the public, including the Android operating system and Gmail and a whole bunch of other things. And so they've paid a lot of attention, and they've paid some designers probably a lot of money to come up with a nice look and feel for their apps. So if you're looking for a way to add some visual polish to your app and without having to like have a whole set of designers, then this can be a great tool. So consistency. So this is tying back to the design system idea, where you have these individual components that you're going to use in the same way throughout the app, and you don't have to think about, okay, well, what should this button look like? What should this form input look like? You're going to have kind of some rules or guidelines to help you along as you're creating the app. Accessibility. So Angular Material has been built with accessibility in mind, and this takes sort of two key forms. There's the component documentation. So for each of the components in the documentation on material.angular.io, there is a little section about accessibility features for those components. So that's just some information that the Angular Material team has either used as they were designing the components, and also things that you might need to keep in mind as you're writing your as you're writing your apps to make them more accessible, you might need to add some extra attributes for assistive devices. There's also the component dev kit, which I sort of touched on in the last slide, and those are all the features that aren't really related specifically to material design, but will help you to create a polished app. And there's a whole set of ones of like tools in there that deal with accessibility, with guiding where like the focus is going to be on your page for a user who can only use a keyboard, for example. Usability. So again, Google has paid a lot of attention to making sure that their apps are really usable for the public. And this also kind of ties in with consistency. So when you have a form and the user is supposed to interact with it in a certain way, there's always a little bit of a learning curve, but you're not going to have like 6 different types of forms and like new ways to interact and new animations that kind of draw the attention to different places throughout the app. With the consistency, your users will be able to get used to how an app works in one place and then be able to use it in a different place. And then speed. So this also has like 2 parts. There's the speed of not having to write all of the code for all of these components. The Angular material team has taken the time to write all these components, and there's a lot of work that's gone into those, and you won't have to re-implement all of that work when you want to use the components. But then there's also the speed of designing your app, where you don't have to, again, decide what each button or what each form is going to look like. There's kind of these guidelines in the design system to help you with to not have to make quite as many decisions. And then also Angular material plays nice with data in Angular. So Angular has a lot of observables, and I've used a few libraries that didn't really have this concept of using observable data, and it was just kind of hard, and like we ended up not being able to use them because it just wasn't going to work with our data. But Angular material, the Angular material team and the Angular team at Google, there's a lot of crossover there. So they're working closely together to make sure that these 2 products work together. So how to get started. So when you have an Angular CLI app, you can just run this command, ng add @angular/material, and that's going to do a few things for you. I just also point out the documentation, material.angular.io. And then this is a summary of the changes that are going to happen. But I'm going to pull up here. I just created a project, Angular material demo. And so I'm going to run. That's a good question. There we go. Okay, hang on. How's that? I mean, I'm just running this command, ng add @angular/material. So this is an Angular schematic that has been added by the Angular material team. So this is going to do a few different things in our app, and I will pull up the app to demonstrate the changes that it's making. So it's still working a little bit here. All right, so we can see here in the package JSON, it has installed the Angular CDK, that's again the component dev kit, Angular material, and then Hammer.js, and Hammer.js is used for gesture support on touchscreens. And then in our angular.json file, it has automatically added to our styles array the indigo pink built-in theme. So there are 4 built-in themes that you can use, or you can write your own custom theme to specify like the specific colors that you want to use throughout your app. Then in source, in our index HTML, it's pulled in the Roboto font. That's the default font for an Angular Material app. And then the Material Icons font for the built-in icons, the icon set from Material Design. So that's not really an Angular Material specific thing. Neither of these really are. This is like the Material Design way of doing things. Then in main TS, it just imported Hammer.js, again, for the gesture support. And then styles.css, it just added a couple of basic styles to our HTML and body elements. And in our app module, it has added browser animations module to the imports of our app module. So the Angular Material Library, in addition to having like the visual, like the individual elements on the screen, they've also built in animations. So you don't have to pick what specific animations you're going to use for each component. They have some pretty standard animations that they use that have, a lot of them are specified by the material design spec. Okay. So that's just a recap of the things that it did. And then I have a demo for adding a more complex feature. So I have a StackBlitz instance. I'm gonna open that in a new tab. I think I actually, cool. So this little app is just a piece of a larger app that we have internally here at Oasis Digital. It's just like a learning app that we've built to demonstrate various different libraries. So in the bigger app, we have a configurator. So we're going to be configuring some hospital equipment. But in this case, we just have, oh no. I don't have the demo, or I have the demo already done. So let's just undo this. Well, we'll just walk through the pieces that I was going to demo. Oh, yeah. How's that? Bigger? Okay. So we have, where am I? Do I have it over here? Okay. So we have these different cards, these material cards, and we also have a list. So we have this table, and then we have cards. And we actually have a lot of different Angular Material components on this page. So up here at the top, we have a mat toolbar, and we're using that for holding the logo. And then we have over here a mat menu. So if I click on that, then we have this little menu, and I can click log out. It's not really going to log me out. But that's just a demonstration of that feature. Then we have this input over here, and if you see it, it says search products. I don't know if this, bump that up a little. It says search products as the placeholder, and then this is how Angular Material deals with inputs. So it's the placeholder, and then when I focus, then it moves it up into a little label for the user. So they're not going to lose that information about what they're supposed to fill in. Then down here we have these, this is a mat list. And so we have some headings here and then some list items. And I can, if I click on one of these, I click on Mountain Disk as the manufacturer, then it selects Mountain Disk and it filters down the list to just Mountain Disk. And then this is an example of a mat chip. Thanks. I think, yeah, I was thinking that, and then, yeah, it's a chip in material. So we can select all of those and then go back to our list. Then over here, we have our two buttons. So we can switch between list view and tile view. These are raised buttons, and we can specify the color. So this blue color is the primary color, and then the white is the default color for a button. And then we have this other toolbar here for the product list, and then this table for all of the data. So all of these are Angular material components. There's like very little on this page that's not part of an Angular material component. So I'm going to just kind of walk through this card. So if we go into the app module, when you're using the Angular material, when you're using an Angular material component, they're kind of all packaged up into their own individual ng modules. So if you're just using a handful of the components, then you're not going to pay the price for the entire library when it comes time to bundle your app. So you have to specify which specific modules you actually want to pull in. So in this case, for the card, we don't, oh wait, hold on. Did I end up deleting that thing? Probably. How is this working? No. I feel like it's maybe out of sync. Because I deleted the directory. Okay, but it's, oh, I didn't save. I think that's the thing.
Is this StackBlitz here? StackBlitz.
This is StackBlitz, yeah. Okay, well let's fork this and then see what happens. Open that. Got it. Yeah. Okay, so this is back at the kind of the beginning where I don't have those tiles. So I can switch to the tile view, but I don't have the tiles yet. So if I wanted to add those tiles, then I'm going to need to generate the component. So we're going to have a products tiles component. Then in our module, we are, yeah. How's that? Okay. So we are going to have to add the mat card module. So that's, we're not using any cards in this version of the app yet. So we're going to have to add the mat card module. If we didn't add this, then we would get errors from Angular about it not knowing what a mat card component is. So we add the mat card module. And then we can go into our products and we can take out the default HTML, and then we're going to use a mat card. So we'll have a mat card and then close that. All right, so we're not using this component, this product tiles component anywhere yet, but we are going to eventually want a mat card for each of our products. So here we're going to have to do an input of products, and that's going to be a product array. So do our input or our imports. All right, so we're going to get the products from the parent component, and then we're going to ng4 over those products. So we'll say let product of products. All right, so now we have our component with a list, but we need to actually use this, and then we'll be able to see the beginnings of these mat cards. So in our app component HTML, down here where we were using the app products table, we'll just copy that and make it app products tiles. And we want to display this particular one if our viewed tiles Boolean is true. So I will just change the default to be true so that we can see it a little more easily. So here it's probably super hard to see, but we have a bunch of mat cards just all lined up. They're taking up the full width of the screen, and then they're all just stacked up because they don't have any content in them. So let's just add some content. So in our HTML, we're going to have a mat card title. So here we will say product dot base label. All right, so the Angular material library has a defined structure of what the different components are and what the children will have to be. So a mat card has a bunch of different things that you actually can put inside of it, and one of those things is a mat card title. So when I save that, come over here, now we see the label for each of these cards. And I'm going to pull in some CSS so that we can just get a little bit better layout. There's going to be a little bit of CSS grid and some other layout stuff. So now we see that we have these cards and they're stacking up in 4 columns. But let's just continue adding the rest of the contents. So we have the title, and then we're going to add an image. So the image is going to be a native HTML image tag. So we're not creating some sort of like div and then like making it a background or anything. The way that we tell Angular material what this is by using this mat card image directive. So we have the native image, and then we tell it, okay, this is a mat card image, and then we bind to the source of the image, and then we just have an alt tag. So then over here, now we're seeing some cards. And then we can add just a little bit more for the details of each of these cards. We have this mat card content component. And so we're just going to show some labels. This is a one of the built-in classes, mat small, and then I just added a label class. And then we have this mat body 2, which is part of the typography for Angular material. So back over here, now we have a little bit more information about each of those cards. And then one last thing is we're going to add mat card actions. So down here at the bottom of our mat card content, we have these mat card actions. That's going to be our last piece. And inside the actions is going to be a button, and it just says customize. So over here, now we have these buttons. And this is kind of the prescribed way of creating a card. You can kind of change the order of the card, like the title can sometimes go underneath. But in general, like if you have action buttons, they're going to be at the bottom left of your card. Your images are going to take up the full width of your card, etc. There are a few things that you can customize, but a lot of the design is going to be specified by material design. All right, so we can see that the filtering is still working. We still can see this data table view over here. So that's pretty much all for demo. Now we can we'll talk about how to decide if Angular material is right for your project. So I have the last big project that I worked on was for a company that was rewriting an app that they had in some form for like the last 20 years or possibly more. So it was like a Windows desktop app, and then it was an Adobe Flash app, and now they're rewriting it in Angular. And so this is a company, it's going to be like an app just for their internal users, and they don't have a lot of design resources in-house, and they weren't going to spend a lot of money to create their own custom design system, but yet they still wanted to have like a fresh look and feel, and like high usability, and just like they weren't going to sacrifice they didn't want to sacrifice the polish just because they didn't have a ton of design resources. So that was just a great example of a project that is like a great fit for Angular material. So Angular material is best suited for teams that don't need tight control over a branding image. If you don't need to have your, buttons to have like exactly, some very special shape or something, if you can kind of like cede control to a third party. And of course, Angular material, you can customize your colors. So you can still use your company's colors or to incorporate a little bit of customization. And then if you still want a polished UI and UX. So you're not just saying, oh, okay, yeah, well, I guess the app's going to look terrible because we, don't have designers to work on this. And then also, it's going to work best for teams that are willing to buy into the design system aspects, where it's, okay, the design system says it should really look like this, so we're going to do that. We're not going to try to write a bunch of custom CSS to dig into the Angular material library to make it have more of our own flavor. That's just going to cause a lot of trouble. So it may not be the best fit for teams that need a look and feel that doesn't jive with material design. So kind of the opposite. Like if you do have very specific needs, then, I'm not going to say that obviously Angular material isn't the answer for everyone. So if you have the resources to create your own design system, then you may not need Angular material. If you have users on low-end devices or Internet Explorer that's less than 11. So Angular is compatible with all the way back to IE 9, but Angular material is only compatible back to IE 11. So if your users are using, if you have to target IE 9 or IE 10, then Angular material is probably not a good fit. Chrome should be fine, unless for some reason someone was on a super old version of Chrome, but the evergreen browsers are generally fine. And then if you think the project may move away from Angular material, the templates are going to be very Angular material heavy. Like all of your components, not all, but like a large portion of your components are going to be Angular material components that you've brought in from the library. So if you have this idea oh, well, we're going to kind of use Angular material and build a bunch of things, but we want to be able to switch it out in a few months, then it might not be the best fit because you're going to end up rewriting a lot of your templates and potentially some of your TypeScript as well. So that's what I've got for when it's maybe not a good idea. But if you're kind of not in those categories and you're looking for an app that has that fresh look and feel, and you may not have a lot of design resources, then Angular material can be a great option. Any questions?
If you do have a question, please just get my attention. I'll bring this mic to you. That way folks online can hear you.
I always have questions, but let someone else go first.
There you go.
So we kind of have a, a wide suite of products or applications where we work, and some are Angular and some aren't. Do you have any suggestions on ways that if we had some things that were using Angular material and some that were just basic HTML or something like that, ways that we could get kind of a consistent design across all of those?
So there's a separate library, I guess, that Angular's created called Material Design Components, and that's sort of a platform agnostic component set. So it's a little more work to get that to work in your app, because you kind of, if you are using React or Vue, you have to kind of wrap those the code in that library in in a wrapper for your whatever particular library you're using, and then you can use those as Vue components or React components. So that is an option. There are other CSS libraries that kind of approximate material design. They may not look exactly like Angular material, but there's something called materialized CSS. But then they're it's not that Angular material is the only option for getting material design into your apps. So I don't know if that.
Okay, yeah, I think that helps. So
Yeah, there are definitely other options. This is just sort of the this is the first party option for an Angular app. But if you do have other types of apps, then there are other things that you might consider.
Question if nobody else has got their hand up. Okay, so that's two questions. The first one is just subjectively, what is it like? How does it compare just subjectively, putting together a template with Angular material versus just the way we all start learning it with just divs and H1s and all that junk? And I'll ask you the other question. You can answer both. Is if I have a medium-sized app, 5 or 10 screens or something, how hard is it to move from just using plain HTML to using Angular material?
So the comparing it to kind of doing your own vanilla HTML and CSS, I'd say you're writing a lot less CSS when you use Angular material. A lot of the CSS, even in the example app that I showed, most of it's stuff to get your layout to be correct. So you might be using Flexbox or CSS Grid.
So was it that tiny bit? Was that all the CSS you wrote for that screen? Just that little tiny bit?
No. I had a little more on the.
It's still not very much.
It's not a ton, and most of it was, I use CSS Grid, so a lot of it was the CSS Grid aspects and just a little bit of tweaking to like for like the context where I was like actually using those particular components. So yeah, and like there's just kind of more guidance too with like what kinds of components that you should use, and like especially with something like the mat card where it's like, okay, yeah, you have the mat title and then it handles all the styling basically for you. So, and then there is a learning curve to using Angular material. If you were building like, well, so if you're building a tiny app and it's not going to have all that many material components, then it might not be that bad. But if you're building a kind of medium-sized app, like there's definitely it's going to take some work. It's not like, okay, yeah, you just like throw together a whole app in 2 hours. But you kind of like learn a lot, and then you kind of are able to like piece together the like the knowledge that you've acquired, and then it's like not that bad after.
Okay, so I'm a hybrid designer and front-end developer.
Cool.
I see it as useful. It's kind of like using Bootstrap for Angular, but how customizable is the Angular materials?
So Angular material is not super customizable right now. So the material design, the like kind of new thing with material design is that it's going to be themable. So the design spec is not as like rigid. Like everything must look exactly like all the apps don't have to look exactly the same. But Angular material is the implementation that has like been around for a couple of years. So Angular material right now is not super customizable. Again, like you can change the colors, but if you try to like get in there and start changing a lot of things, it's going to end up being kind of a headache. But hopefully Angular material is going to like move in that same direction as material design.
So you had that list of what do you call them, the design patterns, the 3 different frameworks you had up there, like VMware Clarity and all those. What is sell me on Angular over the other 3, if you would.
So I would say the biggest thing about Angular material is the relationship with the Angular team. So the like Angular material, you know that it's going to work with your Angular app, because if there's a problem with it, then both teams are going to kind of try to solve that problem. And then, so there's like that aspect. And then, I mean, of course, there's also the subjective design, like visual design, which like I'm not going to like mandate that like Angular material is the only way to go, but I would say the fact that Angular material is sort of like a first party solution is a big benefit.
So getting back to your demo, where you've got the main pane of the cards, mm-hmm. and then you can select and filter them with the left-hand menu. Is that do Angular component? Yeah. Do the components compose where you've got some components are like a container type that can contain other Angular components, or mm-hmm. and both from a layout point of view, and also you've got the interactivity where you can select the chips and filter your list.
So which specific part are you?
Oh, like you've got the mountain disk selected on the left, and you can unselect that. And is Angular itself providing that wiring and that plumbing, or
so the code for that is over here. We have this mat list out here, and then that goes down there. And we have a mat chip list, and then we have a mat list item with an NG4. So we're using this mat chip list within our mat list. So there are certain components where you can kind of use other things within them. Some of them you can't. Like some of them, like you like literally have to use exactly the prescribed way. But with this particular one, I kind of embedded a mat chip list inside of the mat list.
All right. So back to the design system question. So I noticed that Bootstrap wasn't on your list. And so like when I think about like, oh, you know, what's my default look and feel going to be, I often would group Bootstrap into that category. You know, is there a reason why that wasn't on there? Like what, how would you compare
I was thinking of Bootstrap as more of a just a component set and less of a design system. Like there's less like specification about like how you are supposed to use Bootstrap. Bootstrap could easily be on there. It wasn't like it cannot be. It's not the same. But that was just kind of my thinking was it kind of came out of this like just like, oh, okay, this was just the CSS styles that Twitter used, but I don't know.
So I saw you hit some kind of a glitch with your stacklets. So my question is, like, if you're on like you know, we're over here in this meeting room, who knows if the network's any good, but like in normal use, normal good connection, fast computer, like you can load like a reasonably complex Angular material thing in stacklets. Does that work well? Can it handle it fine?
Yeah, it's usually fine. I mean, sometimes Stackblade apps in general take a minute to start up, but I haven't noticed specifically it being worse with Angular material. But
I just saw a long list of imports, and I wondered, like, is that okay to have a long list of imports in stacklets? It sounds like it is.
I've got more of a comment than a question. I noticed, and you'd shown in a couple different places where instead of a component, Angular material opted for a directive. And I just want to kind of point back to the seeded my own question earlier of like sell me on one versus the other. Angular material coming in conjunction with the Angular team. Would you say like the use of directives being an example of where that coupling really pays off because of that, like they're not messing up the ability to use like semantic HTML while also gaining all of these design system benefits?
right, which would kind of be the like one of the differences with like using Bootstrap, like the traditional Bootstrap, which is like a CSS library with some jQuery. And using that in an Angular app, you might have a headache. There are like Angular kind of implementations of Bootstrap. I haven't used those, but yeah, since this is like an Angular specific library, you kind of get the benefits of it having all of those, like it takes full advantage of the Angular features.
Well, first, what version of Angular are you using? And then what versions are compatible with the design system?
I am on Angular 7. I'm on the latest. And then I believe Angular material, yeah, so I'm on the CLI 721, but wait. Oh, yeah. So it's 721, so it would be 721 of Angular as well. It's been around for a long time. It's been around since like before Angular 2 like really landed. So I would say it's probably available in all of the versions, but you may not have you would have to use the ones that kind of pair. Yeah.
You mentioned the CDK earlier, and that's actually one of the things I'm really most interested in that's kind of grown out of material. I know I've seen some things recently, like on one of the projects that we're working on, we've taken advantage of the new drag and drop capabilities that came out of the CDK. Can you help me understand better the relationship, the current relationship between the component development kit and Angular material, and kind of where that's going? It's okay to say no, because maybe only the Angular material team knows, but I certainly don't know, and I'd love to have some sense of that because it would help me plan some things.
I'm not sure specifically where exactly it's going. It does sort of feel like the CDK is this other separate thing that actually doesn't really have to do with material, which is interesting because the library is sort of two halves. But yeah, I don't know specifically what they're planning. It was my guess that they were going to have all of the components available as CDK, but that doesn't seem to have happened yet. I don't know if they're planning on doing that. Right now there's only 3 components that you can use in the non-material way. So it's the table, the stepper, and there's one other. But it's kind of the more complex ones. And I guess a lot of the other ones are kind of more about visual styling. So what are they really going to do? So it's the ones that have the most interaction, they have built on top of the CDK.
So I can provide a little more background on the difference and the separation. So with the CDK, the idea behind that is it provides a library that will help you with the behavior and interaction of the components themselves. So for example, if you have a button, you'd have to normally go in and program all the hooks for when you hover, when you click, when you mouse over, when you mouse out, when you're done clicking. For example, inputs have the same thing. And so the CDK is the collection of code that helps you understand that life cycle of events that have happened that make it easy then to connect that to a styling system. And so the material team, they split that off and then applied the material style on top of that behavior, then published the CDK. That way you could apply your own completely different style to that same set of behaviors. And so that's how those two things kind of interop together.
Well, I've got one small comment, briefly related. Not another question, but I think you mentioned, or maybe somebody mentioned, like Bootstrap. So for anyone who has the good fortune of being in the room and not on the live stream, there are a couple of people in the room here you can find afterwards who have worked more extensively with Angular and Bootstrap integration. There are people in the room who might flee the room now that I've said this, but.
I think most of those people have moved over to Angular material.
All right. I guess that's all. Thanks for coming.